This is your Chargers linebacker, Deion Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. This is your first time tuning into the show. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, it has been a long time since we have gotten a chance to say this sentence. Let's preview week 1, Chargers versus the Raiders.
I got chills.
Let's go. It's rivalry week. The hype is intense. The emotion's palpable in the air. Football is back in general, but when you get started off against one of your biggest divisional rivals, it always means a little bit something extra. Dan, let's do this.
As Francis says, family, trust, respect are the vibes we have all week and all year, for being honest. We love doing live shows. This might be one of the very first live shows we've done on a game preview. But we figured, you know what? Let's kick off the season and let's just go right for the rip. Let's do it live. Folks in the chat, welcome to Chargers Unleashed Live. You know the drill. We like to make this as interactive as we can. Hit the like and subscribe. And while you're at it, if you have any questions, topics, thoughts, predictions, worries, fears, whatever it is, put them in the chat. We'll do our best to kind of put them in to kind of set the stage for today. And we'll go through the week 1 preview that is the Chargers versus the Raiders at SoFi. We'll go through kind of the keys to the game, kind of the matchups on both offense and defense for the respective teams, kind of go into the key players, as well as storylines and coaching expectations for this upcoming game, kind of for the rest of the season too, but more importantly, this game. But Jake, before we do any of that, let's pay the bills. Let's talk about our friends, and then we'll talk about why Matthew is asking Jake why you are always wearing black.
It's a good question. But first, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything for online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet for up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the UFC to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today to get in on the action. Just make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here.
Jake, Bolton Chad, BTFU. But Jake, why are you always wearing black?
First of all, question. Dan knows this, okay? He was there present at my wedding ceremony. And even our officiant was talking about the differences in colors, because my wife's an interior designer, so she's very aware of the color schemes and, what everything means. And where Jake, this was his own words, is technically the absence of color, because literally 95% of my wardrobe is black. So,
in heart and in soul.
Don't read too much into it. I understand this is Raiders week, but in truth, this is what my wardrobe is. So don't worry about it. Nothing to be afraid of.
Yes. No shortage of storylines and headlines and stars in this matchup. And we had a bunch of comments in here already and questions. First thing off the rip, though, Jake, we go into this week 1. And I think first and foremost, all throughout the offseason, the goal was to get to week 1 healthy. And there have been some stumbles and bumps along the way. We've seen some abundance of caution throughout camp, throughout preseason. And for the most part, I believe the only participant that is currently injured and not practicing is DJ Chark. Now, I don't even want to say injured, but he's not practicing. Oh, I think Jake is on mute.
Sorry. Tarheeb still did not practice today. Apparently, he and DJ Chark are both nursing hip injuries. But at least from the standpoint for Tarheeb, he was limited in practice. So it's a sign that that's going in the right direction, at least. But to your point, Dan, yes, for not fully practicing, it's nice to see an injury report that looks pretty damn clean.
Yeah, we talk about Joey Bosa that had the broken hand, had the club for a while. Club is not there anymore. We've talked about Justin Herbert with the plantar fascia injury. We've talked about lots of guys kind of getting off for a bit. And, wouldn't you know it? I think at the end of the day, the Chargers, I think, did what was best for the Chargers and for the team. And honestly, I think one thing that is certain is this Chargers team is hungry. And you look at this Chargers versus Raiders matchup, week 1 in SoFi. We talk about the new branding that the Chargers are going to be having with the see the lightning, feel the thunder. There's a whole bunch of stuff that this Chargers team is going to be unveiling, both aesthetically, pre-game time stuff. Everyone talks about being in your seats early on. Sean Merriman looks to be a part of it. But it is a new era of Chargers football. And what I think is fascinating is externally, and a lot of times even folks covering the team, we don't really know what this offense is going to look like or what this defense could look like. And that's kind of exciting, but also genius by the Chargers and their staff for kind of keeping things close to the vest. And I think it makes for a really compelling week 1 matchup and again, all week 1 matchups are intense, but this one especially, given the backdrop of the 63-21, given the backdrop of the Telesco being there, given the backdrop of all the Raiders Chargers history, there's just a lot of unknowns in this new era of Chargers football that begins on Sunday.
You got to be hyped for it, Dan. It is weird, and I like the fact that you actually brought that up in terms of the intrigue, because there's been so much turnover on this roster from both a personnel and a coaching perspective. And it was like last year, you had Kellen Moore, who was coming in as the new offensive coordinator. It was still Brandon Staley going into year 3 at the helm. And at that point in time, because we still knew that he was calling the defense, even though you technically had a pseudo defensive coordinator, you knew that he was calling the defense. So you were just looking to say, okay, where is this offense going to improve with Justin Herbert? Where is it that's going to convince me that they've improved defensively? Could they get the run game going? Was that offensive line going to be, was it going to hold up any better? And in truth, we found out progressively throughout the year that none of those things really ended up coming to fruition, unfortunately. And now there's just been so much of a confidence boost with Jim Harbaugh in here. And from the standpoint that what was absentee with Brandon Staley during his term is that you have so many coaches that are familiar with Jim Harbaugh that are now on this Chargers roster. The connectivity, the message, the goal of what needs to be accomplished on both sides of the football. I just don't see how he's going to allow this team to get off to a bad start. And even through the first 4 weeks, will it be flawless? No. Will this team stumble here and there? Yes, they will. But it just in terms of being a much more competitive team, not falling to the old chargering line that was used so much throughout last year and blowing fourth quarter leads and actually having a defense and a run game that can assist Justin Herbert to get W's at the end of the day. I think that's where we're going to see the biggest improvement. Overall, the culture shift from Jim Harbaugh is real, and I can't wait to see that effect on Sunday.
Priz Magic says, will Herbert be playing? I don't like this scenario stick. I don't know if he's just been under a rock for the last couple weeks, but yes, Justin Herbert will be playing. And if Justin Herbert is not playing, I probably would guess that Easton Stick might play, I guess, week 1, if it wasn't Justin Herbert starting, which he is. But I didn't want to get to that. Tyler Heineke will be here at some point, Taylor Heineke. But yes, Herbert will be playing. And I believe Bosa was confirmed that he is playing. He's on the injury report. Guilty as charged is in here. Shout out to guilty as charged, by the way. Not on the injury report, so he's set to play. There you go. Let's see. Over under asks Sholo Man on number of hip drop tackle penalties for Sunday's game. I mean, this Chargers, I can tell you this certainly. This Chargers team has preached fundamentals and tackling.
They're going to tackle better.
So I'll tell you, Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Mitchell are going to go absolutely ape shit crazy pissed if they get one of those, because they shouldn't. They should not. So, as we always do, we're going to have the Raiders offense versus the Chargers defense, vice versa. We'll talk about keys of the game, coaching expectations, bold predictions, as well as our predictions, which I know Jake loves. And coming soon, we're bringing it back by popular demand. We will be having the voicemail hotline that we'll bring back after week 1. So we're going to put this out on X. We're going to put this out on X. We'll get people's either pre or post game reactions, thoughts. We will play them live for Jake for the first time. We can all have some fun with this. If anyone remembers when we did this, I think 2 seasons ago, it was epic. And I look forward to those. So Jake, be ready. Be ready. Stay ready. Okay.
What a callback. When Dan first introduced this idea, I did not even know about it, which was about a week ago when he first brought up the idea of it. And when this was implemented, just so everybody has the context, this was back before Chargers Unleashed was even called Chargers Unleashed. I mean, this was many, many moons ago as it relates to Dan and I doing this show, but it was a fun interaction. And it got interesting, especially when we were getting voicemails after a Chargers loss.
Oh, man.
I'll say this much. I probably had some of my best laughs on the show, having to answer some of these questions and emotions and trying to talk people off the proverbial cliff. So I'm interested to have it back. I think a lot of people want to participate in it now, and hopefully the vibes will be good come Monday from everybody.
Yes, let's keep the vibes good. Island Charger finally able to catch a live show. Shaka from Hawaii. Welcome, aloha. Jake, so set the stage here. Chargers, Raiders, we know what happened last year. Split 1-1. Tom Telesco no longer the general manager. In comes Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, and the whole staff. So many different players on this team. The Raiders have a few different players as well. They added a pretty darn good tight end in Brock Bowers that both of us really like. They have I think, underrated linebacking core. Their front 7 is probably what their bread and butter is, of course. They add Christian Wilkins. They've got Maxx Crosby. They've got Trayvon Moehrig. Running back is a little interesting. They've got a running back who's kind of looking forward to kind of take on that leading back role now that Josh Jacobs isn't there. So all eyes are on Zamir White. They have Madison as their RB2. But overall, like looking at kind of just the team matchup, there are a lot of people in the chat talking about, some people are saying it's evenly matched. Some people are saying that shouldn't be evenly matched. What do you make of just the overall, like who has the edge on offense, defense, and special teams and coaching?
I mean, in general, even if you look back through the last 2 coaches that the Chargers have had under Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley, it didn't matter what the roster really looked like in general between the Chargers and the Raiders. You knew that the game was going to be competitive and it was going to be close either way as it relates to the Chargers, obviously with the exception of last year's 63-point fiasco that the Chargers gave up. But hey, that turned the fortunes around for a certain team. After that, the vibe was very different that next morning. We all know what that was like. But in terms of this matchup, going into this with new coaching staffs, obviously we've been saying for years, Dan, that the Achilles heel as it relates to the coaching X factor for the Chargers, not having that for so long, I think that you can take that as an advantage. And I think the biggest advantage of that is going to come to Jesse Minter. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But as it relates to the overall personnel, it's going to be interesting to see what this offense is going to look like. Obviously, with Justin Herbert throwing to a brand new crop of wide receivers, not having Keenan Allen out there, not having Mike Williams out there. Obviously, Josh Palmer is going to have to step up as the wide receiver 1. How are you going to integrate Ladd McConkey in this? You know that the Chargers are going to want to get the run game going. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and I personally think you're going to see some Kamani Vidal in there as well. I think that they're going to throw a heavy dose of the run game, and they're going to try to give the Raiders a different look each time that they do it. And why not? Why not give Justin Herbert another facet of this game to help him out, not just as it relates to weapons, but hey, where he doesn't have to play Superman every game. It's nice. And then on the other side of the ball, Dan, Defensively, this is the best crop of edge group that the Chargers have had in God knows how long. They have not been this deep that I can remember. Joey Bosa now has the cast off of his hand, which is a great sign. As you mentioned, he's not on the injury report this week. So to have him, Mack, Tooley, and Dupree all ready to go is huge when it comes to what Jesse Minter wants to do, and that's get after the quarterback. You mentioned the linebacking crew. I think what they have done under Navarro Bowman during training camp thus far has looked extremely impressive, and a lot of that shine was not even really coming from the likes of Junior Colson or Deion Henley. That was coming from the other guys that were in that unit. So you got to give it to Navarro Bowman and the defense on that circumstance. And Dan, I'll be intrigued to see, because remember, just looking at the first Chargers depth chart release, that Elijah Molden was listed in there as the safety. You knew who your cornerbacks were going to be for the secondary unit. I'll be interested to see if it comes game day, if they're going to elevate someone from the practice squad, a la Tony Jefferson or what have you. So especially on defense, Dan, I think that this defense is going to be much improved. I think that's where you're going to see the most improvement for sure.
Yeah, I go chalk with a lot of things that you said. I think that this Raiders team, I don't know how much of a different identity we're going to see from this Raiders team that we have seen last year, honestly, especially towards the end of the back half of the season for them. They were playing pretty good football. But here's the thing. One, they have Gardner Minshew at quarterback, which I'm not saying he's terrible, but he is not a top 15 quarterback. And the thing that has plagued this Chargers team has been the inability to get the most out of its players and the inability to adjust. Those are the two things. If we can go into like underneath that umbrella, there's a lot there, but they now have a head coach who is firmly believing in his own identity and has been transparent throughout about this team needing to be tougher, that the team has to be more physical. This team has to be more balanced. This team has to be able to run the ball. It is paramount that they protect Justin Herbert, and they, on defense, prioritizing getting to the quarterback, and they did so with the wallet, and prioritizing depth and versatility in the secondary, and creating conflict for the opposing offense, making what they do look hard externally, but is easy to do internally. That's different. All of those things are different for the Chargers. And so this is a brand new Chargers team top to bottom. You have a healthy Justin Herbert, a healthy Joey Bosa, and Khalil Mack, which again, we have not seen that very often. We also have a new number 44, Jake. Scott Matlock is now the sole starting fullback, changed positions. I'm curious to see, like, what do you see that looking like?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Just get in there and hit somebody. Okay. I actually don't even care if the run ends up being like a 2-yard loss. If I see Matlock go in there and just plow somebody, I was like, I'll take that as a win, honestly. It's not like he's going to be playing fullback the entirety of the offensive series. There's just no way from a standpoint that he's going to be able to play on both sides of the football like that for 60 minutes. So I'll be interested to see where and how they utilize him. I would love to see him in goal line situations, Dan. Jumbo, put Gus Edwards behind Scott Matlock and have him be your lead blocker. Yes, please. I'll take that all damn day. So I'll be interested to see how often they end up using him at the fullback position. But we were wondering, was it going to be Jordan McFadden during training camp? And then they started inserting Scott Matlock at the fullback position. And ultimately, he ended up winning out. So, hell, I can't wait. Screw it. Put Scott Matlock in the Steven Anderson role, where he was the fullback and then went out technically as like a pseudo tight end and then ended up catching like a long pass. Put him in that inside the 10-yard line and have him catch a tutty. That would be great.
That would be wonderful. Francis says, will Chargers finally have a home field advantage this season? It's going to be, I'll be honest, going to be tough against the Raiders. The Raiders always travel well, / lots of them live in LA to begin with, or San Diego or wherever. It'll be tough against Raiders, but I have a feeling you're going to see a lot more Chargers fans at these games than we saw in years past. And even past years, like the home field advantage was there for most of the season. There are certain teams that travel extremely well. The Raiders are one of them. The Cowboys are one of them. They've played them a few times the past couple of years, obviously. Otherwise, like they really haven't been outnumbered from a fan perspective. Maybe if I remember right, like a Steelers one, possibly. But honestly, I'm not worried about that. Like, I think this new vibe, I think there's a lot of excitement around this new team and Coach Harbaugh that, yes, I do think that there will be more of a home field advantage this coming season. Jake, let's start with the Chargers offense versus the Raiders defense. We do this every year. We'll go one way, flip to the other. And again, this is kind of the fun part is we don't know with 100% certainty what the offense is going to look like, but we do know that Maxx Crosby is an absolute game wrecker and is arguably the best edge rusher in the NFL. And we know the Chargers know that as well. They go out and draft Joe Alt at number 5 overall to have the bookend tackle alongside of Rashawn Slater, along with, and I think this is important, along with Will Dissly, who is arguably the best run blocking tight end, or excuse me, best pass protecting tight end, with both actually, in the NFL. They bring in guys like Kamani Vidal, who are pass blocking running backs. They improve the offensive line on the right side. They improve the offensive line, bring in Trey Pipkins over to right guard. That's a lot of beef on the right side. Add in Bradley Bozeman, Christian Wilkins, another addition that the Raiders have had. They're going to have their hands full on the offensive line. There's no doubt about it. And clearly is where this game can be won and lost. Is you talked about earlier, it's very easy to say, oh, if they win the trenches, they win. Sure. But in this game specifically, if they can fend off Maxx Crosby from wrecking the game, I like our chances, period. Maxx Crosby is the one guy on defense, Christian Wilkins as well, but Maxx Crosby is the one that scares me. They have a couple guys. Again, I think Nate Hobbs is good. Divine Diablo, I think, has looked better as of late. Their linebacker, Spillane, I believe is his name. He's underrated. That's what I was referring to earlier. Otherwise, their secondary isn't that scary. I can't talk because the Chargers' secondary was horrendous last year. But overall, like, that's the Raiders' defense. And, you know, everyone talks about the 6-3 points. I mean, that's going up against Easton Stick and a whole bunch of backups in a game where everyone was checked out. On offense, though, for the Chargers, Jake, there's a lot that's up in the air that I think a lot of Chargers fans are itching to finally see the preview come to fruition.
Yeah, if you think about this, we went back and we talked about advantages, disadvantages. Obviously, with number 10, you're always going to have a chance to win the game. We know what he obviously brings to the table. But when you look at this unit offensively, just in terms of new faces, new places, there's a lot of new faces around Justin Herbert right now, where Raiders defense, in terms of their core unit, they've been together for a little bit of time now. So in terms of getting in sync, you hope that you're not off to too much of a, stumble and delay. You hope that you get the Justin Herbert who came out of the first practice as soon as he came out of the boot. And as Daniel Popper said, had one of the best practices that he's arguably had with that franchise. That's what I'm hoping for, Dan. I'm hoping that this wide receiver core and this run game are going to surprise a lot of people. I expect them to lean heavy in the run game, assert their presence with authority, own the trenches. You mentioned the big test for Joe Alt. I think it's a big test for Bradley Bozeman as well, for having to go against a guy like Christian Wilkins. Can you establish that run game? Can you set the pace? Can you allow that to get yourself in third and short situations to where it's not Herbert having to sling it all the way down the field, where you can come up with a bunch of different options, keep the defense guessing? I think it's just we say that with a bunch of question marks, not because we're not confident that it could happen, but we haven't seen it implemented yet. We're too used to what the vanilla offense was of the Joe Lombardi and the Brandon Staley days were, and it didn't really do anything to instill a lot of confidence. So to have all of this now under Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, to now see this fully come to fruition and see what their vision is, because they've always told us, well, improving the run game is important, but we're damn sure not going to take the ball out of Justin Herbert's hand. I really am so excited to see number 10 sling it down. I think he's coming in motivated. I think Jim Harbaugh's impact on him is going to be huge. I personally just think that he's going to come in with his hair on fire. And I'm not talking about a 400-yard game, but I think he's going to be efficient. I think his decision-making is going to be good. I think they know what they want from him out of this game. I don't think that he's going to force anything into bad decisions given the new offensive line and the running game that he's going to have around him. So I think he's going to be precise. I think he's going to be efficient. And he's ultimately going to lead this team to a victory.
Oh, Jake's already getting his prediction out early. Focus is something that I think this team has lacked. And it's been unfortunate, if we're being honest, because you see so many games just slip away because of whether it's boneheaded penalties, whether it's boneheaded plays or play calling, or too aggressive or too conservative or miscommunication, whatever it is. There has not been enough focus from this team collectively, from coaching on hell, from GM all on down historically. But Jake, you and I have been there multiple times at camp this year, and we have seen how focused and how intense they are this year on the little things, not just the big things. And it's not just about, oh, we got to tackle better, because last year, folks forget, last year, everyone talked about how critical it was to improve tackling going into the season. And everyone mentioned they're going back to fundamentals, and it just never played out. We've seen it again this year, but I think that I have a bit more faith in Jesse Minter's ability to teach and Steve Klingscale's ability to teach and focus on the intimate details, especially in the secondary where they've had the most trouble. They're healthy now on defense, but again, like we'll get to that on the other side of the ball. But the Chargers offense now has a standpoint and now has an identity that they have lacked forever, other than Justin Herbert put the cape on. I hope that this new season is Justin Herbert throwing 23 to 28 times a game, top 15 in rushing, top 15 in passing. That's what they need. And punt it. You don't have to be crazy. You got a defense that can just be average. We don't need crazy. We just need average. And I wholeheartedly believe, as we get to the other side of the ball, this Chargers defense can be average. Like, that's not too much to ask. I really don't think that's too much to ask. Anything else on the Chargers offense versus Raiders defense? We're going to get to like the big keys later on, but specific matchups or things to look for there.
Yeah, my eye is on Zion Johnson. Obviously, I know it's going to be on Joe Alt for many reasons, but the transformation that Zion Johnson has built upon himself in a single offseason, and then being there, listening to the offensive line coaches talking to Zion during the drills, and then to see him ultimately perform for it, he obviously physically looks bigger. He looks stronger out there. He looks like it looks like this is the guy that the Chargers believed that they were drafting in the first round a few years ago. And in full mold fashion, putting him next to a guy like Rashawn Slater is only going to help him. But I think for Zion on his own merit is going to develop into the offensive guard that they believed that they were going to get eventually with him. And with this coaching staff, I think that they've unlocked it. So I'm really excited to watch him play on Sunday.
It is refreshing. Well, we have not heard anything in terms of complaints or glaring issues or really anything with Trey Pipkins at right guard. I remember how big of a storyline that was and how big of a storyline it was. Can Joe Alt go to the right side? We've heard nothing about concerns on that so far. And again, they're going up against elite week one defensive line. So we'll see. But it does feel good to have that right side seemingly solidified, improved, bigger, more agile. And to Greg Roman's point earlier in the offseason, I am all for bully ball offense. I am all for going medieval on the Raiders. Seeing that 1, 2, or 3-headed monster of Vidal, Dobbins, and Edwards, sign me up. Show me a blocking tight end. Yes, please. That's what I would like to see. And I think this Chargers team is going to be unapologetically themselves. They told you who they are. You've seen who the past teams have looked like under Jim Harbaugh, especially on offense. You're going to see it again. Other side, Chargers' brand new defense, hopefully, against the Raiders' offense, led by Gardner Minshew, obviously Davante Adams, who is top 2 or 3 receivers in the NFL. What do you make of this one?
I mean, you know where the ball's going to go. I don't think that there's any secret here, Dan. You know where they're going to aim to get the ball.
Well, but is that true, though? Obviously, I mean, yes, Davante Adams, clearly. But they've got Jacoby Myers. They've got Michael Mayer. They've got Brock Bowers. Like, they've got dudes. But they got one guy throwing it.
I was going to say, and you're trying to tell me that you're not going to try to get the ball to your best playmaker out of that group? Especially since Davante thought that there was some shade being thrown,
Pop-Tart thing.
the Pop-Tart thing, and then basically, so he's definitely coming into this matchup geared up. And as far as his games against the Chargers, they've been good. Now, like you said, it's a different look defense. This is not Mike Davis that he's going up against anymore. Christian Fulton's going to get a hell of a test come week 1. I'd be interested to see how the Chargers are going to deploy their secondary in terms of who's going to be covering who, but I would assume that it would be Christian Fulton's duty for this one. And then are they going to rotate their corners? Are they going to come up with some type of exotic packages, obviously with Derwin James? How are they going to try to do their best to not have Davante be the focal point of this game, but without losing anything defensively? Because yes, you might have to double cover him from a time or two, but is that going to make you open in a different part of the field? And again, this is going to be something that Jesse Minter is going to have to adapt to. Now, you mentioned the other wide or weapon options for Gardner Minshew there with Michael Mayer and now Brock Bowers coming into the fold. That's going to be a test the same as well, Dan. So Tarheeb still, how's the slot going to man up? Are these linebackers going to be able to take these tight ends out of the game when it comes to passing situations? I think in terms of coverage, this is going to be a great game for Deion Henley to display what he does in coverage. We saw it a little bit during the preseason. If Junior Colson is ramped up and ready to go, which it looks like he's going to be, seeing this duo together and man the middle of the field is going to be so much fun to watch, because I truly believe that they have the IQ and athletic ability to be one of the best duos in the league. And I think it's kind of flying under the radar. We've watched it immensely how this linebacking core has improved in just the short period of time that it's been together. But I think from Deion Henley's physical ability as an athlete, on top of Junior Colson knowing this defense more than any other player that's out there, that's really going to be fun.
It is. Looks like a Raiders fan is here. Respectful one. Appreciate you. Doppelganger says, your team is a lot like our team. A bunch of new staff and a bunch of questions. I'm excited to see how it goes. I am too, honestly. Like, this is an exciting matchup. I know the rivalry and all the fans popping off each other. Like, it is what it is. Whatever. This is an exciting matchup. And obviously emotions are going to run high and we get all of that. But this is exciting. I think this is really exciting. And I think this is where you're hoping for the biggest jump on the Chargers side. Because, again, we've talked about this. Justin Herbert's offense, since he's been at the helm, has been, I think he's had more points than any other team since the merger for his first 4 years. But then, unfortunately, the defense has given up the most points since the merger. So it's kind of hard to win when your defense is giving up as many points as the offense. Like, that's hard. And when your offense is that good, that's what makes it hard. Now, there's a comment here earlier, I think it was from James Wagner maybe, about this is the first time in a long time that, here it is, James Wagner says, for once, it's great not really being concerned about the depth on the Chargers team. Now, you could say this about many positions on this team, but looking at kind of the secondary and the linebacker room, as well as the edge group specifically, yeah, we haven't had this much depth and connectivity in a minute. They bring in Elijah Molden, who kind of has that slot corner safety flexibility. I think they have him technically as a safety. Christian Fulton has looked as advertised and looks rejuvenated for the outside. Asante Samuel Jr., you know what he is. You've got Jazeer Taylor, who had a pretty good season, all things considered, last year. You got the rookie corners coming in. Derwin James, Alohi Gilman. That's a good vibe and group right there. You add in Tony Jefferson, maybe AJ Finley. That's a group that you're confident in. And seeing how they've performed and seeing how well they were connected gives you something to be excited about. Because the last few seasons, it has always been like the back-breaking miscommunication or the back-breaking wide-open touchdown that has plagued the defense. This defense has closers all over. And you look at the linebacking, you mentioned Navarro Bowman. Like, that's probably the biggest improvement year over year that I've seen so far has been the linebacking core, which is saying something because the cornerback room looks pretty good. They just got 5 interceptions or whatever it is last week, 2 weeks ago. That's going to be good. And the defensive line, Taylor Tart, I think is going to be a big influence on this team. Puna Ford as well on the interior. They've got big size on the inside that can keep an anchor down. And they have an edge group that this Raiders offensive line is not good. It's not that good. So if you can get to them early and often, they're going to have to play from behind. And that's when this defense, I think, gets lethal. So there's a bunch of key matchups. Obviously, I think I'm curious because historically it has been Asante Samuel Jr. usually on Davante Adams. We've seen those battles. I wonder how much Christian Fulton is going to take on Davante Adams this year versus what we've had in the past. Because he seems like the one that would be more aligned to him, or maybe they'll just kind of move around and not worry about it.
Yeah, like I said, I'll be interested to see where Jesse Minter goes with his game plan as it relates to the secondary. Are you going to rotate your corners on Davante Adams to just try to give him a different look? Are you going to be double teaming him? What are you going to be showing him that in turn is going to either give something different to the Raiders offense in terms of where the ball is going to be going? And you hope that that doesn't open up something in the secondary or the middle of the field for them to get yardage in a different way. So it is a big test, regardless of what we want to say about Gardner Minshew. And if you want to call it the weapons or the lack thereof, just do not sleep on this team. They will find ways to move the ball. This is still game one with Jesse Minter at the helm at the defensive coordinator position. Do I expect it to be improved? 100%. Do I expect them to get after the quarterback, something that they were just unable to do under the Brandon Staley area? Yes, I do. Do I think you're going to be seeing packages where you have Khalil Mack, Tooley, and Joey Bosa on the field, and even a rotation of Bud Dupree in there? Yes, I do. And I think that this pass rush is going to be much more improved. I think this interior, this defensive line is going to be much more improved. But they're going to have to show it because the questions of the Chargers over the last few years in a different secondary has been stopping the run, which they have been very inconsistent at doing. And we saw what the pass defense looked like last year, even against some of the most pedestrian type offenses. They still found ways to pass the ball on the Chargers last year. So you're obviously looking for those things to improve. And I believe under Jesse Minter and this scheme and the rest of these defensive coaches and personnel, they're going to do it.
Another Raider fan entered the chat, which we appreciate. All of you, feel free to come in. Herbert's foot better be good because he's going to be running a lot. Max, Wilkins, and Kuntz, come on. Look, we said it. I said it earlier. Like, their defensive line for the Raiders is legit. Thankfully, Justin Herbert's foot is 100% fine. He's good to go. All of that was cleared. It's been cleared for a bit now. So I'm not worried about the foot injury. I think that was an abundance of caution thing that the Chargers were doing. And again, just so you can expect it, Raider Felon and the rest of Raiders fans, as soon as Justin came back to training camp, he had, I think it was 3 of his best days he's ever had at training camp, ever. So it's not like he lost a step. It's not like he's trying to come back and get ramped up. He's there. He's good. Jake, the question came in from Chasing Ghosts. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll do our best as we get to the keys of the game before we get to predictions. Do you think the simplification of the defensive scheme will truly help the defense play better? I'm assuming it's for the Chargers. They preached simplification of the run game last year with Kellen Moore, and they were just as bad. I always appreciate these perspective questions because remember how hyped we were when Kellen Moore came in and how hyped we were about the run game week 1. And it just, everything was just a cluster all season. So do you think the simplification will actually work? And have you seen examples of the difference in the new scheme?
Yes. Yes, I do. On both of those questions, it's a yes. Number one, I have more faith in Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter to be able to execute and adapt. Because as Dan said, we essentially had some of the problems that went with the Chargers throughout the entirety of the season. Those all started in the first couple weeks of the year, and we're just never able to be corrected. And it felt like the similar story when it was under the Brandon Staley, Joe Lombardi scheme as well. It was just never able to be corrected. It was wash, rinse, repeat, the same thing week in and week out, and without those issues being corrected. Even if you were to foreshadow to say at some point the Chargers lose a game, I will sit here and I will tell you, I expect that team to come out and show improvements on the mistakes that would have happened the week prior. So even if we're talking about this game, comparing it to last season, or if you want to foreshadow when the Chargers ultimately lose a game, I think that they will find a way to come out better. Again, I go back to the comments that were made about Jesse Minter before they even were a part of the Chargers organization, Dan, and you know where I'm going. Jesse Minter was called one of the best in-game adapters that some coaches have ever seen as it relates to what he does from a defensive scheme. I can't wait to see how that's implemented. I think that we've already seen.
We know what it's looked like when it's the opposite.
Yes. I'm excited to see what that's going to look like with Derwin James, Dan. You're seeing all these stories about just him getting back to himself. We've even had Jim Harbaugh talk to you and Jesse Minter go to Derwin personally and say, let's get you back to playing like the all-pro safety that you were.
Absolutely.
I think the simplification of this defense in terms of just fundamentals, tackling, guys being in the right position, and knowing how and where you win on both sides of the football, the Chargers are going to have a much more improved run game because you now have a stable of guys that can do it and you're not just relying on one guy anymore. And defensively, I think they're going to find they're coming with the message, be physical, and they're going to get their wins because of it.
Yeah, for those who have not done so already, I highly encourage you to go see the video that Brett Coleman put out on Jesse Minter's defense and what makes it successful and both simple and complex, depending on who's looking at it. And it's the modularity of the defense where they have almost like an infinite amount of possible different variations of formations that they can throw at Chargers opponents. But it's simple for the Chargers defense to learn in that they learn a set number of plays for each position, and then they can interchange them throughout whichever scheme and play call they want. And so the simplification, and again, it's one thing when a coach says it, but it's another thing when what is being said and what is being heard match. Because that was the issue last year, or last 3 years, was whatever was being taught for whatever reason by this coaching staff was not landing with the players. And he saw that play out on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays. So far, again, I talked about it during preseason. I haven't seen this Chargers defense look connected this much from the secondary in a long time. Is it perfect? No. But for the most part, like they're doing pretty much what they told us they were going to do. They're going to bring that bend did not break defense. They're going to try to cause chaos, force turnovers, pressure the quarterback a lot, be sound and fundamental on the back end, and play physical and athletic sideline to sideline. And that's what they've been doing. So that's a key to the game, obviously, is if the Chargers defense can just be average, this team's going to do great things this year. And I believe that they can and will be at least average. Because there's nothing that this team has shown us to lead me to believe it won't be, other than past seasons. But this new team, again, this is like a third of the roster has been churned over. So it's all new. So it's hard to glean a lot from history to this season, especially for this Chargers team. John Smith asked, will Joe Alt be lined up against Maxx Crosby?
Oh, yeah.
Probably.
I still remember last year when the Chargers first played the Raiders. I'm not sure if it was Maxx Crosby just wanting to test himself, but I think he played the first 2 snaps on Rashawn Slater's side and then never went back to the left because he didn't go anywhere. So it's just, hey, I'm going to go over to Trey Pipkins and I'm going to have a much better game. And ultimately he did. So yeah, I think he's going to stay on Joe Alt's side the entirety of the game.
Yeah. And, we talk about this edge group, how great it is. And obviously that's where pressure is going to come from. But what makes this Jesse Minter defense so fun is where the pressure can come from. And you're seeing corner safety blitzes, linebacker blitzes, odd man front. You see all kinds of stuff where offenses don't know where it's coming from. And that's what's kind of fun. So the adjustments that are coming with Jesse Minter are always fun. And what has been exciting as much as anything for me is seeing the coaching staff after the games are over. They'll talk about how the team did that game preseason, and they'll say, oh, we had the right adjustments. We had this, but these players got to focus, and they will call out specific things that their players just lost focus on or missed an assignment. But that shows the level of detail that they're after and what we have not seen in the past. So I think the key to the game, obviously, is going to be, the turnover battle. The Chargers can't turn the ball over. But I go back and forth, but I do think time of possession is important, specifically for the Chargers offense.
Yep.
The Chargers offense has to get rhythm because so much of last season was anything but. I know the defense can give up yards for the Chargers, but I'm not really worried about the yards thing if they can keep it to 3 and force turnovers. We have not seen a Chargers offense that can consistently run for a first down since my gray hair started coming in. That's the key. Can this Chargers running game express itself? Can they block up front, both linemen and tight ends? And can we see J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards bring that medieval offensive play style to the Raiders? Because the Chargers simply have not done that in years past.
No, it's been too long since you really felt that this Chargers offense was a physical juggernaut, that they could outpower people. For too long, it's been the finesse offense of the Chargers. And yes, you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert. You come off of the Phillip Rivers era, you transition to him. But it never really changed from being a physical team. You knew what you had in number 10. You knew you always had a chance to win the game with him. But too many times, he had to play from behind, or once he would score a touchdown to take the lead, it would be a defense that would give it up. And there would just be too much on Justin Herbert's shoulders. And there was never a right investment in an offensive line that ended up helping him out too soon, or inconsistent stability in the run game, bad coaching decisions, terrible depth on the defensive side of the ball, and in other places, if I could be honest. But team building in general, I think this is all going to show itself, Dan. The work that Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh have done over these past several months in putting this team together, I think you're going to see it. I think you're going to see guys to when you can actually say, Why is it important that Joe Ortiz is making these type of moves at this period of time where you had a GM, a former GM, that didn't do it? The results of that are going to show themselves this year. More importantly, when we're talking about guys 1 to 53, Dan, I think you're going to see the 51st, the 52nd, the 53rd guy out there making plays. That's how much in tune I think they are. And it's not just going to be starter heavy. It's not just going to be big name heavy, which this team has relied too often in the past on. I go back to the interview with when they had now I can't remember who it was. I keep wanting to say Joe Lombardi, but it's not Joe Lombardi. Anyways, it was one of the former GMs that they had on Pat McAfee, and he basically had said the
Mike
difference.
Lombardi?
Thank you. That's who I keep wanting to say Joe Lombardi, but I'm like, no, that's not it. Mike Lombardi. Thank you. He had said the difference in this team to the last team, where the Chargers relied too much on talent, they're not going to do that anymore. It's now not going to be who's the most talented team. It's going to be who's the most connected team. That's where I think that this Chargers team is really going to flourish.
Yeah, and if in putting it simply, other teams have preyed on the Chargers' lack of depth. And it is hard when you are that top heavy to be that good with that thin of a roster when your backups are that much worse, especially when injury strikes. And you saw all that come to a head by the time you got to that Raiders game last year. This is a different Chargers team where it goes deep, and it purposefully goes deep. They're doing it proactively to keep these guys fresh and to rotate through. Question from Dicker is my kicker. More rushing yards this game, Justin Herbert or Gardner Minshew? I go Justin. I say Justin. Not that it's a ton, but
right. Not that it's a ton, but I would hope that you're going to have some of those calls ready for Justin Herbert to utilize his legs. Very underrated aspect of his game, and we love it when he can go mobile.
Are you comfortable doing that now, given the foot stuff? Or
I mean,
that's all
probably not. I mean, I'm just basing it off of this question. I would probably lean towards Herbert's direction. Do I want him to run under these circumstances? No. You got 4 other running backs behind you to do it. Just give the ball to them.
Yes. Yeah, I will say, someone put in here, I'm excited to see Junior Colson ball out. Amen. Preach to the choir. And again, we talked about the linebackers, Deion Henley, Junior Colson, Denzel Perriman, throw in Nick Neiman whenever he's healthy, Troy Dye. That linebacking core has made plays, and Deion Henley is poised for an absolute breakout season. And the idea of him and Junior Colson being kind of the long-term solution at linebacker is massive. And so, yeah, I think, and just the eye test, the linebacker position is far more impactful in this defense than we saw in years past. Mark says, got my McConkey jersey coming in the mail. Attaboy. What's everybody going to the game wearing? What are you rocking? I'm still deciding what I want to wear. I'm not sure. I will be there in attendance for week 1. So if you see me, come say hi. James Wagner asks, how many kick return touchdowns for Darius Davis? Let's go. Let's do punt and kick for the season. I will do over under. Ooh, punt and kick. I'll do over under new kickoff rules, which I think will give a lot more opportunities. Over under, let's say 2.5. I'd almost book he gets 1 kickoff return.
Yeah, I would guarantee that.
I think he can book 1 punt return. It's the
third. It's the third one. It's the third one that gets me. What gives me confidence in this is another year under Ryan Fitkin. And it tells you something when literally Ryan Fitkin is the only coaching holdover from the previous regime of how good he did last year. So I think, especially as you mentioned it, Dan, the new kickoff rule is going to give him more opportunities. So because of the more opportunities, I'll lean on the over.
Okay. Optimistic Jake has come into the chat. I like this. Marks talks about the modular defense of Jesse Minter going to make problems for the Raiders and all defenses, saying that there's so many different disguised blitzes that can come in. Sean, give a shout out to the Bolt fans in Mexico. Absolutely. Awesome. There were Bolt fans everywhere in this chat, which has been awesome. Let's see. Jake, over. Who wins? Okay, let's just go through this real quick before we get to kind of our bold predictions and all that jazz. More rushing yards, Chargers or Raiders?
I think you got to give that to the Chargers because that's been their message all offseason. There's no way I think that you're going to go away from that unless you find yourself all of a sudden in a double-digit hole and have to rely on Justin Herbert to pull you out. But I think that their message is going to be clear. They're going to run the ball, and I think they're going to succeed in doing so.
More passing yards, Chargers, Raiders. It's a tough one.
I'm going to say the Raiders, but I'm going to say it from this perspective. Justin Herbert, to me, can put together a 250-yard, 2-touchdown game, and as long as he is precise, consistent, not turning the ball over in any no bad decisions, that is a win for me. I could totally see a game where, again, you have Davante Adams winning in certain situations and the Raiders having to get more pass yards because they're playing from behind. So I'll say that.
More sacks, Chargers or Raiders? Go with your head, not your heart here.
Yeah. It's tough for me. And again, it's really hard to see the barometer. Again, we're talking about 4 edge players at the Chargers. You haven't seen an edge group on this team stacked like this before.
No.
And to have that type of depth and the creativity with Jesse Minter on how he's going to utilize blitzes. Let's not just think about the defensive line. You saw it a little bit in preseason with how he was disguising some of his blitzes and having his corners come off the edge. I think he's definitely going to keep doing that. He's not going to shutter away from that at all. Find different ways to bring pressure. So, yeah, I'll go with the Chargers there too.
Okay. Turnovers. Who wins it at the end? Total. That is such an evil laugh, by the way.
I know. Sorry about that. That's one that I'm just not ready to predict. It's not one I'm ready to predict.
There's a question in here that said, do you think that Scott Matlock has the same skills as Lorenzo Neal?
No. Lorenzo Neal is all world in the history of Chargers and fullbacks in general. I like where your head's going. Again, you see Scott Matlock as a specimen, as a defensive line is something to behold, but even still putting him in a fullback spot, I know is impressive. But let's pump the brakes on that. I'm excited to see Scott Matlock get some in the running game as well, but it's not to that level yet.
Dicker, as my kicker, says, I'll be happy if Matlock plays to the level of Mike Tolbert. Yeah, like let's set the bar at the right level here. We're talking about an interior defensive lineman who just switched over to fullback, and we're comparing him to one of the best fullbacks of all time. Let's pump the brakes here a little bit. Let's pump the brakes. Brandon Hall, this one for you, Jake. Brandon Rice or DJ Chark, who has the best season?
I mean, number one, hopefully DJ Chark is able to play this week.
Better be
As of
DJ
right now,
Chark.
he has not practiced. But I would believe if we were calling all things equal and both of them to this day were healthy, I'd say it's DJ Chark because of the fact that he's going to be one of your starting 3 and probably your X receiver for the majority of the season.
Yep.
Not that I have anything against Brendan Rice either. I have been a champion of his all off season. I thought he got dealt an unfair hand during the preseason due to bad quarterback play, and I hope he gets his.
Justin Timberlake is in the chat. We're hoping that the Raiders can cry us a river on Sunday, but he puts 2 lightning bolts. That was good, right? Is that good? You know what the best part will be is if the Chargers win. all of the Chargers fans saying bye, bye, bye to all the Raiders fans?
Oh my God.
Pretty good, right? Come on now. Let's see. Harbaugh doing his pregame ritual with Herbert and the punching the pads thing. I'm fascinated by this.
Yes, he did it with Easton Stick during the preseason. You don't think that he's going to give it to number 10
I
as
didn't
well?
see it. Did he do it to Easton Stick?
He did it on the first game. He did it on the first game with Easton Stick to get him hyped up. He's definitely going to do it to Justin Herbert game 1.
That's going to be everywhere. That's going to be everywhere if that happens. I love that. Chasing Ghost says this is going to be 2006 week 1 all over again. Chargers domination and sack party.
I love the optimism. I think it's going to be closer, more competitive, but I love the optimism.
Mark says Raiders are going to run up the middle where they think the Chargers defense is the weakest.
I mean, it's not a bad plan, honestly. It's not a bad plan.
Yeah.
There still is some question marks with this interior, this defensive line, because of the standpoint that, yes, you have Tart, who I think is a key
huge
veteran signing, not just in size, but literally in purpose.
Yes.
And then Poona Ford, who I've been a fan of since college, while he may not be your prototypical guy in terms of height and someone that you would expect to actually find success on the defensive line, he's still able to find ways to disrupt the plays. But in terms of what you have behind them, i.e. Scott Madlock, I would assume that Tito is going to hopefully take as the fact that now he's healthy. He was still battling an injury all of last year, but I would hope that you're going to find more success from him. But if I were the Raiders, that's where I would go. Joey Bosa is one of the best edge setters in the league when it comes to stopping the run.
That's true.
I wouldn't go to one of the Chargers' strengths. I'd go to one of their weaknesses.
Or perceived weaknesses,
perceived. So until that changes and until we see it, I can't blame him for looking at that.
Yeah. Isaac says calling Joshua Palmer has his breakout year. People are sleeping.
Don't sleep on Joshua Palmer.
Yeah. I heard some other podcasts that were kind of discussing the Chargers, possibilities for the season and them talking about how the Chargers receivers are trash and, is Brendan Rice going to be the wide receiver 1? And I'm like, what are we talking about here? And they just forget that Josh Palmer has been kind of in the shadows of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and has still balled out when healthy. Again, big asterisk. But again, in this Greg Roman offense with Jim Harbaugh, I know Justin Herbert's still going to throw it. But generally speaking, it's going to be 2 receivers, maybe 3. And they're going to be heavy packages. There's a lot of play action. We got Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, DJ Chark, and Quentin Johnston. Those are your 4. For 2 spots, sometimes 3. You'll take that. Jays Wagner, Jake, will Minter put a shutdown cover over Adams? How do you predict that, by the way? Do you think they're going to kind of blanket, kind of shade to over double team Adams, make somebody else beat him?
You can't do it all the time. Do I think that they'll do it throughout the game? Sure, I do. But as we were talking about earlier with Derwin James and Jesse Minter wanting to get back to using Derwin James as a versatile chess piece and move him all over the field, you're going to have those times where you can't afford a double team Davante Adams because you're going to have Derwin James doing something else. So you're going to hope that whatever you implement on that certain play ultimately succeeds and you never get an opportunity to throw to Davante if he's beating his coverage down one-on-one.
Here's a question. More myth player in this game, Keenan Allen or Josh Jacobs?
I mean, I don't think that you can dispel why the reaction was the way it was when Keenan Allen was traded to the Chicago Bears.
That was a tough night.
I don't think that we can dispel the notion that when it came to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 28, that you knew where the ball was going to go every single time, really, because Keenan Allen was Justin Herbert's right-hand man in this offense when it came to especially those 3rd down situations. So in terms of missing, you kind of have to lean towards that because we don't know exactly what this new wide receiver group is going to look like with these new head coaches and Justin Herbert in this type of an offense. So as of right now, you'd have to say that. Not to say that it's going to generate wins and loss and one's going to be a huge detriment to the other. But in terms of a safety blanket like that, yeah, it's hard to replace.
I might go the other way, honestly. And this is no shade to Keenan Allen because Keenan is I think he's a Hall of Famer. Keenan Allen is a superstar and arguably still incredible. We know that. But on the field, both in scheme and in roster, I think they've done things to try and either replace or change what Keenan Allen brought. They brought in a Lad McConkey who is kind of a similar slot demon type of receiver, has some outside flexibility as well. Definitely more explosive and faster than Keenan Allen, but he's in that similar Lad McConkey's always open type of feel.
Joshua Palmer was kind of Keenan Allen light.
Exactly. And now Joshua Palmer can kind of fill in those shoes as well. On top of the fact that Keenan Allen was getting peppered last season or throughout his career. Whereas I don't think that's going to happen this year with any of the receivers. I don't think it's going to be a true number one receiver this year. And I think that's a good thing. On the other hand, Josh Jacobs, what are they doing to replace him? Their running back is the guy that everyone's wondering what they're going to look like.
Zamir White can run.
I'm not saying he can't run.
And you buffed it up a little bit with Alexander Madison, so you just still have some veteran depth in there. So, do I still think they're going to try to? I think that they could.
Josh Jacobs is a.
I understand that, but I think it'd be easier to say right out of the gate, can you spell Josh Jacobs with two running backs as opposed to what the Chargers have at the wide receiver position right now? Could you confidently say that? To say like, yeah, it's going to happen, and the Chargers aren't going to miss a beat.
I don't know. I think Keenan Allen's going to be missed less than Josh Jacobs.
Okay.
Ron Silva says McConkey is going to be Justin Herbert what Wes Welker was to Tom Brady, and God, I hope so, because we watched that duo rip apart the hearts of every NFL fan base for a decade.
I don't think I'll ever get over the fact that Wes Welker was once with the Chargers.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that. Seth Walker, shifting the focus. Won't the Chargers have a massive amount of money for next season? Expectation that we sign some big name players. We got about maybe 10 minutes or so here. Get your last minute questions, thoughts before we get our predictions in. Jay, what do you think the vibe is for the next offseason?
Well, I mean, number one, you're going to be out from underneath the debacle that was the J.C. Jackson contract, which is nice because you had a lot of that dead cap that was going towards this season and which essentially handcuffed you into making some of the tough decisions that you had to during this offseason. I'm not so sure what the full contract is going to look like. And I do not want to get ahead of myself because between now and March, there's a lot of things from a contract standpoint and a personnel standpoint that can ultimately change. And I get it. Here's what I'll say. The Chargers tried that whole have the most cap space that you've ever had in years and go out and sign a bunch of free agents. It didn't work.
Flamed out.
It's about signing the right ones. It's about signing guys that you know that are going to be hungry in this scheme. What I'm more confident on is that you could go out and you could actually spend your money more wisely and get a better bang for your buck with that type of an acquisition. Not to say that the Chargers aren't going to do that, but I'm more confident in them making strategic moves like that. And I'm not trying to compare it to what Tom Telesco did. I'm saying that the results are going to be different. So whether you go out and you spend money on a high-priced free agent or you don't, I think you're still going to end up yielding results of it because of the fact that the culture of this organization has changed.
Yeah, I'm with you. Are you ready, Jake?
This has been the one part of the show that I have not missed. So thanks.
I'm wondering how Raiders. Martin says Telesco is a fool. I wonder how Raiders fans are feeling about Tom Telesco right now. What do you think?
Well, wasn't everybody talking about that they were expecting him to go out and get a corner, add something to the corner depth, and it never essentially happened? But you had to You had to add Thomas Harper off of waiver cuts from the Chargers, which
Tail
of course,
bonus time.
look, we all expected that to happen at some point. I'll tell you this: if you think that the Raiders taking some of the Chargers players when Tom Telesco wasn't the GM was a lot, I'll be interested to see what happens here in the next couple of years.
Yeah. All right. Bold predictions, Jake. One on offense and one on defense and or special teams.
I think J.K. Dobbins goes over 100 yards.
Wouldn't that be something?
I think J.K. Dobbins is so hungry to run the ball right now.
We've seen it.
You could see it in his jubilation at his press conferences, even when they were talking to him during the preseason games on the sidelines. He is so ready to put this injury history behind him and just get to work. And I think now, is he going to be running back one out of the gate? No, I still think that belongs to Gus Edwards. But I think as the season goes on, I think it's going to shift in his favor for running back one. He's going to bring the type of explosiveness that you're going to want to get you some of those big chunk plays. Gus Edwards is going to get you the tough yards, and you're going to need them, especially when it comes down to the goal line. But in terms of moving the ball between the 20s, JK is going to be that. And
I like that one.
I think he's going to do it. When you have a coaching staff now that is going to be committed to the run as they are, and when you have a running back stable that you can actually give JK a break from time to time, you're going to keep these guys fresh, which I like.
Yeah. Okay, so defense and or special teams. Bold prediction.
I think Thule's going to find a way to get to the quarterback twice.
Thule. I like it.
Thule. I think he's going to build off of what he showed from us in his rookie season. Once again, you now have depth at the edge position. I'll be so interested to see how they're going to end up rotating that core four when you have now guys as Thule and Bud Dupree as your 3 and your 4 in terms of pass rushers goes. But yeah, we know what Thule's all about. He's just going to find a way to get to the quarterback, whether it comes on a stunt or off the edge or whatever it is. The enthusiasm, not unbeknownst to mankind, but the enthusiasm that Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh have for Thule is really high. And I think they're going to find creative ways to get him after the quarterback.
Yeah. On defense, I think I'm going to go 5 sacks. And I know, the Khalil Mack had 6 by himself. So I don't know if it's that bold, but I'm going to go 5 sacks by the defense. I think 2. I think you're going to see. No, okay. I think there's going to be 1 defensive touchdown. Scoop a score, pick 6, something like that. On offense, I would love to see the Hayden Hurst game. I think that'd be fun. This would be a good Hayden Hurst game. Give me like 65 yards and 2 touchdowns for Hayden Hurst. That's my bold prediction.
Nice.
All right. Moment of truth, Jake. Final scores. What's the over-under on this game right now?
I thought it was 40. If someone's got it in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought it was around 40, Dan. I could be wrong.
Okay. What's your over-under?
I think it goes under. Again, you go back, and I know we might forget about it. You could say on a surface level, yeah, the Chargers and the Raiders split games last year. Well, the one that they won was when Josh McDaniels was the head coach of the team, and then he was ceremoniously let go, and Antonio Pierce took over the Raiders, fittingly enough, on Halloween, and it led them to a 5-4 record. And trust me, I respect Antonio Pierce a lot. I think what he's done to rejuvenate a spark in that team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I think is going to keep them in this game. And again, it's the Raiders and the Chargers. It's going to be a tough game. I do not see this being a blowout. I think it's still going to be a competitive, tough, physical game. But how about you give the game winner to the new 4-year signed kicker that is just unbelievably accurate, kicks a game-winning 45-yard field goal. The Chargers win 20-17.
20-17. Okay, so it's a 3-point spread right now, over under 40.5, I believe. Is that what it says? Yeah, 40.5. This hurts. I kind of want to say, I think it's going to be 27-20 Chargers. This game has been circled forever. And I just, knowing how this season went for the Chargers last year and all the Listerine they had to use.
You're going to want to get that bad taste out of your mouth.
Yeah, I think they do it. Yeah, I'm winning this week as well. So, any last questions by any folks before we get out of here? Let's give maybe 3 more minutes, Jake, before we get out. Let's see. Jorge says 27-20, more like 63-0. Love the positivity. JR asks, does Rashawn Slater get a new deal before kickoff?
No, I don't think he gets a new deal before kickoff, but I teased him with this question, Dan, when we were in San Diego, because he was signing jerseys and signing pictures. And I was asking him, are you going to be signing a piece of documentation here in the near future? And think about this for a second. If the Chargers' message with Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz was to protect their franchise, and they kept telling us the entire time, seemingly under the table, of what they were going to do in the draft, they stuck to their guns and they invested in their offensive line and they selected Joe Alt. I just can't see a picture where you let one of the best left tackles in the game get away. So I think at some point this season, we'll see during the season, not have to wait till the offseason. I think you're going to see it during the season that Rashawn Slater gets a new deal.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people are bullish on the Chargers team. Everybody's saying Chargers victory. Dickett for the win, 5th highest paid kicker in the NFL. Family trust, respect, of course. Chargers convincingly 28-14, 24-21 as well. Jake, we did it. Week 1 preview. The next time we talk, it will be post Chargers week 1. We'll see how this goes. We got a fun giveaway for folks who have not gone and seen it. We have a giveaway for a signed custom Asante Samuel Jr. jersey that we will announce prior to the kickoff on Sunday. Go to LAC_Unleashed on X, and you can see the rules and qualifications to get in. And best of luck. Again, we'll announce the random winner on Sunday. Jake, anything I missed or you missed? You want to get out before we pack it up for the evening?
Thank God football is back. Dan, for any football junkie that's out there, you get football tomorrow night on Thursday. You get football on Friday. You get college ball on Saturday. And we all know that a majority of us are going to be sitting in front of a television watching 7 hours of uninterrupted football starts right now on Red Zone. And, of course, Raiders and Chargers. It's going to be a fun weekend.
Raiders and Chargers, week 1 matchup at SoFi. Get tickets if you already have them. Get there early. We've been promised a lot of fun things in store pregame as well. The enthusiasm unknown to mankind will need to be seen by the fans as well. Let's go support this new era of Chargers football. Lots to be excited about. Also a lot to be anxious about. But that's why we see these football games play out. And that's why we all tune in and cross our fingers throughout. For Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake T. Hefner, myself at Dan W. Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the game. Football is back, and we will talk to you next time on the next Chargers Unleashed.